Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. My name is Rusty Gaylord. I am your host, and I am very happy to have Diraj Goel with us today. Fork in the Road is a conversation with smart, interesting people who have done cool things in their life, and it's an exploration of how they got there. What are some of their learnings along the way, the lessons, the decision points, or the forks in the road that they encountered, and how that propelled them to where they are today. So Diraj Goel is our guest today, and Diraj is the founder of Get Fresh Ventures, which is a venture acceleration studio for companies that are doing good in the world. He's got an interesting background. We're going to get into that in a second, but let's just bring Diraj on and welcome. Looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, we were just chatting before we got started here, and you were sharing a little bit of a story when a number of years ago, you had just bought a new home. So you had taken on a new mortgage. Your child was about to be born in a couple of months. And somehow in your head, it became the right time to leave your job when you were the VP of business operations at Hootsuite. And I'm just,
Yeah.
most people would say, wow, my goodness, you've already got all this change, a new house, a new mortgage, a new kid, and then you leave your job. So take us back to that moment, and how did that, how did you make that decision, and why at that point did it seem like the right thing for you to do?
Yeah, I used to say to my wife, my greatest fear was having a big mortgage and a kid on the way, and having to support a family and not having a job. Uh, and then 3 months before my first was born, my daughter who's 5 now. I was sitting on a Friday night at the office, and we're working on our board deck preparation. I was running a team of, I think, about 60 folks at Hootsuite, across business analytics, business operations, sales enablement, business strategy, facilities, basically anything that all the other execs didn't want to run. The head of operations ended up running it. And at that point, it was I had been years in the tech, high growth tech space, and doing 60 to 100-hour weeks was pretty normal. And here I was sitting on a Friday evening, and there's back and forth emails with execs and so on, and there was this long road of things that still needed to get done. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I've got a newborn coming. And I do remember when I was a kid, my dad used to work 6.5 days a week. He used to work as an engineer at Texas Instruments. I remember sitting in the lobby waiting for the door to open on Saturdays, where we would go out for lunch and go to the zoo or do these fun things. And I couldn't wait for him to walk through that door. And I just remember how much my dad worked, and how many moments I missed with him. And right there, my greatest fear changed um, from not having a paycheck to with a kid on the way to not having time with my kids. And that then became the compelling reason for me to say, I think it's time that I go back to my roots as being an entrepreneur. And I was about to turn 40 in August of the next year, just a few months after my daughter was born. And I said, if I was going to do it, I had to do it now. Before I was 40, before the kid was here, and before I really felt that I couldn't make that same move.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things that stands out to me about that story, Jiraj, is your greatest fear in changing, right? Initially, it was having a mortgage, having a kid, not having a job, and then it changed to not being around with your kids. And the thing that stands out to me is how fear can be such a motivator. And yet, as an entrepreneur, I think most entrepreneurs are not motivated by fear. They're motivated by a purpose, by a direction, by something, an impact that they want to create. And so I'm curious for you, is like, how did that shift in you as you went back to the entrepreneurial world and leaving the big company? Did that shift from more of a fear orientation to like a passion orientation, if you will?
I think every entrepreneur is going to have a combination of purpose and fear. I think it's a healthy mix of both, with a little bit of crazy mixed in, to be a great entrepreneur. The fear in that moment drove my decision
Mhm.
to leave my 9 to 5 and branch out on my own. But the purpose was always there. When you're with a company, you give a lot of yourself into that company. Obviously, you leave a little bit you leave some on the table for your personal life and your friends and your family, but you give a lot, especially if you're a purpose-driven individual who's out to make a difference. You're going to give a lot to the place where you spend a majority of your days at, which is your job. But in the back of my head, there was always that underlying need to do more, to do that greater good. After leaving my job, I said to my wife, well, I know I want to be an entrepreneur, but I actually don't know what kind of entrepreneur I want to be yet. So I reached out to my network, and one of the first folks I talked to was Bill Tam, who at that time was the CEO of BC Tech, and they had a hyper growth accelerator that they had been running for a few years that needed a refresh and a revamp. So I decided to take on that challenge. I rewrote the accelerator and the model of the accelerator, and it became a 6-week program. And we started with purpose. We started with working with founders to really define their business model, their purpose, their brand strategy, their talent brand strategy, before we even got into the sales funnel. And initially, it was such a leap because everyone goes into an accelerator trying to learn how to run sales and how to get more sales right away. So this whole exercise of we need to organize our business, and we need to have a team dynamics meeting, and we need to talk about our purpose and vision and values. Like, isn't this wasting a whole lot of time? I need more sales.
Mhm.
What we learned out of those 2 cohorts that we ran and the programs that ran is that we actually achieved all those things. In fact, at the board meeting for the first cohort that we ran, um, a few of the companies got funded right out off the bat because it was very metrics driven. We took an exercise in building the framework of the business before we actually built the engine on top of that framework, and then built an engine with a clear model of execution
Mhm.
that took into account the human element and the business element, and that
Mm.
launched Get Fresh Ventures. The framework from that program is what I use as a framework with the companies we work with today.
So I'm curious where that passion for you came from, because having spent time in the corporate world, I know that valuing people is often expressed as something that's important. The people are, companies will say we value our people, but that's not always reflected in the reality of working at those companies. I mean, you described 60-hour weeks or 100-hour weeks in some cases, 24 hours,
Hmm.
spent staying up all night in order to do something, where that can really the priorities of the company can overwhelm your personal priorities, and yet you came into this new event, this new organization that ultimately grew into Get Fresh Ventures, and you prioritized purpose. You put people at the center. And I'm curious for you where that idea came from. Did it come from your corporate experience, or did it come from another aspect of your life?
Uh, it actually came from my corporate experience. The first role I had as a director, we used to have these once every couple of weeks, half-an-hour town hall with the team, and we had a team of 20 back then that I had built, and I remember one of the team members saying, what would be great if I knew what work I was doing and how it impacted the company, and everyone in the room said the same thing.
Mm.
And the company started to invest in the people side of things. There was an employee manual. We started to work on their vision and our values, but what that translated into was this kind of disingenuous approach to it. It was more
Mm.
good words on a wall that
Yeah.
were placards than anything meaningful in how anyone made decisions in the business on a daily basis or how
Mhm.
people treated each other. Um, and it didn't really make an impact. everyone just kind of rolled their eyes and like, okay, this is a rah-rah. I used to work at Future Shop, which is, a Best Buy equivalent here in Vancouver, back in the day. And I remember sales meetings that we used to have when I was in my teens working there. And it was a whole bunch of rah-rah with a bunch of folks rolling their eyes. And so, here I am at a $100 million tech company, and it feels just as disingenuous. What what was missing there was personal desire, coupled with business outcomes. You know, if you don't have the humans enrolled and on board and really tied to the purpose of the company, you have employees. You don't really have a team. You don't
Mhm.
really have camaraderie with folks. You have infighting. You have politicking. You have hidden agendas. You have unset expectations. You don't really have camaraderie. Ev- Everyone is looking at the whole and being on everyone else's side of the ship rather than we're all sinking.
Mhm.
And that's really what compelled me to look at motivation, culture, and everything from a system standpoint. I'm a builder. Everything's an engine to me, and that was one of the pieces that I implemented in the program I wrote around the human and business engine. There's a
Mhm.
human engine that runs the business engine, and the business engine needs to serve the humans, who ultimately serve other humans, which is why we're all in business. And
Mhm.
having simple guiding principles that if everything you do is for a system, you should be automated. Um, every human should ultimately be serving other humans, and that when you put that paradigm and you start talking to the humans at the table that you're working with on why they're there and what compels them and what makes them excited, and also then having a collective conversation around that, I got to see the fruits of that labor. uh, my team started focusing on their personal vision, their team visions, and what they were going to do, and how they were going to collaborate, and how they were going to build towards a collective vision. And
Mhm.
our productivity went up significantly. People were there, management overhead reduced, and and it just became such an easy fix that I kept kicking myself for not thinking about it sooner. But
Mm.
that was the
Yeah, that's
first time
awesome.
that I really took an effort to understand the human side of the equation.
Nice. We just got a comment here from Tyler just saying, "Thank you for sharing your experience on growth hacking." And I love that because what you're talking about is you could make an argument that says it's not really growth hacking, but it is, right? It's like, how do we
It
engage
is.
people? Because it's people that are going to actually drive the growth of your organization.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe this is obvious, it kind of on the heels of this conversation. But one of the things I picked up that you had written somewhere is that you help businesses get more clients, more profit, and help help them take more time off. And I thought that was so
Yeah.
fascinating. It's like, most people don't think about that. They're all about the clients, the profits, all of that, the more customers, but actually to get more time off. And it seems to fit very much in this realm of what you're just describing.
Yeah. There's this whole paradigm now, right? Funny enough, the company I used to work with, Vision Critical, that's now called Alida, just introduced a 4-day week program.
Ah,
They're expecting the employees to still work 40 hours a week, but get a 4-day week. Um, and with the paradigm shift with the pandemic, what the pandemic has brought forward with work from home programs, and some companies going fully work from home, being completely empathetic because of all the parents that had their kids at home while trying to do a 40-hour week, with daycares all closed, and everyone being that much more empathetic to everyone's situation. There has been a shift. There has been a
mhm.
shift to, okay, how are you doing, as
Yep.
opposed to where's that report, right? So,
Yeah.
and and what we've seen is that productivity hasn't really been impacted in the way that
Mhm.
everyone thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, we were one of the things we were talking about earlier is with like, why give people more time off? Why is that important? And obviously there's the human element of we all have a life outside of work. We have families and all of that, right? So you're alluding to that now. But you were talking earlier that, when you're part of a and purpose driven organization and you feel personally connected and engaged with it, oftentimes your day is filled with getting your work done, right? It's meetings, it's emails, it's all that kind of thing. And some of that creative time happens outside of work or in the outside hours and in the rest of your life. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that. Is like, this, time outside of work is obviously important at a human element, but what I'm hearing in that or inferring from that is it's also important for the business because the business will actually
100%.
benefit more.
Yeah, in old school business terms, it's called offsites. In new school business terms, it's called personal time. Um, and what that really means is that it's the difference between working in the business and on the business. I had one head of sales at one of the portfolio companies in the program, and this is a great example. We were talking about her sales funnel and her pipeline and how she's qualifying deals, and she's like, I can't look at this. I've got to run. I've got to prepare for this webinar. Okay, what's the webinar about, and who is attending these webinars? Well, we just put the notice out, and we're running a webinar on our solution. I'm like, okay, but who's your solution for, and how are you targeting this webinar? She had no idea. She had no idea why she was running the webinar in that
Mhm.
way, who was going to be there, what was the reason, how did that fit into the
Yeah.
funnel of qualification, because she was working in the business. She
Yeah.
knows she has to do webinars, and it's a part of a lead gen activity, but not on the business, as in what should this webinar actually look like, what did I learn about it, how do I improve, and how do I drive towards the outcome. And it
Mhm.
comes back to what I've said before, in that you need that the folks that are purpose driven are going to learn how to improve what they're doing with
Yeah.
purpose, because they're trying to achieve the reach of the business. They're not trying to
Mhm.
get through their day.
Mhm.
And when you have folks that are focused on that, they're going to self-educate, they're going to learn about it, they're going to reach out to thought leaders to understand how they can improve their game. They're going to be purpose driven on improving themselves, which then in turn improves the company.
Yeah.
Which means that they're going to spend some of that personal time on the business, learning
Mhm.
about the business,
Well,
reading a book.
it's actually a great feed into this comment here again from Tyler. I heard of people giving unlimited time off. Like, really? Does that work? And from the people that I know who work at companies with an unlimited vacation policy, there's some cultural resistance to taking the time off, right? It's like, well, you can take as much time off as you want, but then when you do take some time off, there's a little bit of some tension around that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, so the problem with unlimited time off is that there is no proper expectation setting. Okay, so you and I work at the company. We have the same job, and I'm going to take 3 months off. Every 2 months, every quarter, I'm going to take a month off, right? Or, maybe I'm going to take 4 months off. You, however, take 1 week off. We both have the same salary, and I'm overachieving target over you. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. You obviously went to an extreme example, but I think one of the things that we found in the pandemic is really putting an emphasis on results. And it's a fascinating question to think, could you deliver the same results as me working 8 months a year instead of my 12 months a year?
100%. Right. So then what are we paying people for? So is it unlimited time off, or here's a salary, here's your outcome. I don't really care about how you work. So
Yep.
so this salesperson could hire their own SDRs in
Mhm.
Philippines, make triple their top line, use their bonus money to hire a team, and basically they're running a team within the team. um, and then the time off is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Um, but do companies want that?
Right.
Are companies comfortable with that, or are they expecting people to show up to meetings?
So it raises a question to me, which is, I don't know, what is, how do you see this, you could see a shift towards pay for performance rather than pay for time, right? Because I think even though people say you're not we don't require FaceTime, and we want you to get the work done. Even when that's said, there still is an expectation that you're putting in your 40 hours or your 50 or 60 hours, whatever the number is, that you're putting in a certain amount of time. But what you're describing is a total shift in perspective, which is, look, I'm going to pay you, especially in the sales arena. It's relatively easy to do. Here's your target. If you hit it, I don't care how many hours you work. How do you see that happening? And how do you think about that with the companies you work with?
Well, here's the problem. Some jobs don't really have clear KPIs,
True.
and that's part of the engine building issue. Companies are trying to use a cascading OKR model with key results to tie metrics to delivery. The challenge sometimes is that whatever targets you put, they're vanity metrics, or they can't really be calculated, or it's up for discussion. But the sales guys have a clear line of sight
Yeah.
to dollars and cents, right? Like, everyone's a level of a degree of separation. So then the question comes about, well, if this person is so far removed from revenue, and there's no way to have a clear line of sight to value, then how do you really equate their time, and how do you set a target?
Mhm.
For a
Yeah.
developer, is it the lines of code? Is it the number of sprints? Is it the delivery against milestones? And we all know, working with developers, how many actually hit milestones on time. And it's not to say that developers are not capable. It's just
Yeah.
it's a shifting scope when it comes to software.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, it comes down to the challenge around defining that accountability for it to
Mhm.
really have a meaningful impact in terms of results. And some roles can
Mhm.
be easily quantified, some roles can't. I think companies that put unlimited yeah, vacations in place, policies in place, are coming from a good place. It's just it's not qualified enough, and the lack of clarity actually causes more disruption and anxiety than what they
Yeah.
set out to do.
It does. It does. And I see the systems thinker in you coming through in this conversation, which is great.
And that's a fundamental to the growth go to market. I have yet to see a deck that doesn't have a hockey stick curve. But then when I get into the nuts and bolts of it, okay, but who's your target customer? How are you going to sell? And what's your time to close? And what's your average contract value? And how are you going to actually close that? And what's that key positioning? That's usually where it all starts to fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the system side of company building, getting very specific.
Absolutely. Um, so I'm sure there's people out there who are interested in this conversation, want to connect with you and have a conversation. So, like, who are the kind of people who would be great people to connect with you, and how should they find you?
Well, we work with two different types of companies fundamentally. You've got a semblance of product market fit. You're in revenue, and you need to fundraise, and you
Mm.
just don't know how to navigate that space, or how even to put up a valuation. We work with founders at that early stage to really refine their model and get it to the point of investable to raise funding, and we work with them on their fundraise as well. Then the other type of company is where we work with them as a fractional growth officer, and that's usually companies that have raised funding and now have expectations from investors, and they need to build that engine to scale, because investors expect them to raise another round within a 24-month period. Once you
Mhm.
get into the mindset of the investor, their motivations very clearly, which is about driving up the IAR. So the founders that I would love to talk to are the ones that have something in their hands and need the support, either to raise funding to grow and raise more funding, or they've raised funding and they need to grow to then raise more funding and to grow even more.
Yeah.
So we work with VCs and investors who have invested in companies and need that support. We work with founders directly, and the best way to get hold of me is, you can send me an email. It's just Diraj at getfreshventures.com, or getfresh.vc, or fill up a form on our website, which is getfreshventures.com or getfresh.vc.
Excellent. Well, Diraj, thank you. Such an interesting conversation, and such an interesting journey to this point, and bringing your personal values, and just helping to really be on the cutting edge of shaping the new workforce. Right. I think we've all recognized that over the last couple of years, we're entering into a new style of work, a new dynamic, a new paradigm. And I appreciate you being on the leading edge of that, not only in terms of the helping businesses grow, but also helping to rethink about how we work and what is the relationship between people. So thank you
Yeah.
for being here, and thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me, Rusty.
Absolutely.
Take